Mafia boss visited his assistant unannounced. What he saw made him cancel his wedding. 2 days before his wedding, Gabriel Romano kicked in a rotting wooden door, expecting betrayal. What hit him instead was the metallic scent of copper. 48 hours of silence from a woman who had never once been late in 4 years. A fiancée who called it a scheduling problem, an empty apartment with no furniture, no heat, and a trail of dark drag marks across the linoleum floor. Then the bathroom door, a woman wedged between a bathtub and a toilet, grey-skinned, fevered, trying to stitch her own knife wound with hands too unsteady to finish the job. She wasn't selling him out. She had nearly died protecting him from the truth about his own wedding. Subscribe right now and drop your city in the comments, because what Gabriel discovers in the next 20 minutes is going to make you question everyone you trust. Like, share, notifications on. This story is not what you think it is. The chalk scratched against the wool of Gabriel's trousers, dry and irritating, vibrating straight through to his skin. He stood perfectly still on the velvet-covered pedestal, staring into the gilded mirror. The reflection belonged to a man who had spent a decade sanitizing his own brutality into something that photographed well. Charcoal suit, cut close to the ribs, tailored specifically to hide the leather shoulder holster he refused to remove, even for fittings. Sloane didn't look up from her phone. Don't breathe so heavily, Gabriel. Bianca needs the break over the shoe to be perfect. You're shifting. Her thumbs kept moving, firing off demands to people whose names she wouldn't bother remembering. The hydrangeas. She finally glanced up, blonde hair pulled into a severe knot, beautiful in the way a freshly forged blade was beautiful, sharp, cold, entirely unyielding. My mother thinks they look too ferial. I told her we're merging the Kensington distribution lines with the Romano ports. We aren't throwing a carnival. White, silver, black. That's the palette. Whatever you want, Sloane. It was a transaction. A contract sealed in imported silk and 300 guests. Neither of them loved the other. Neither pretended to. The arrangement worked precisely because they understood each other with the flat clarity of two people closing a deal. But as the tailor pinned his cuff, Gabriel's focus drifted to the empty space beside the changing screen. Nora wasn't there. Nora Quinn had been his assistant for 4 years, the buffer between his violent, chaotic reality and the sterile corporate front he maintained for the world. She knew how he took his coffee, black, burning hot. She knew exactly how much cash kept the beat cops in the harbor district looking the other way. She was a ghost in the machine, unremarkable height, practical shoes, an unnerving lack of intimidation that let her walk straight through a room of Kensington enforcers carrying a stack of files, politely asking a man twice her size to move his foot. She had been there every single day. Until 48 hours ago, Gabriel stepped off the pedestal. Senor Romano, the tailor's hands fluttered toward the unfinished jacket. We're done. Sloane lowered her phone, her perfectly arched eyebrows drawing into a sharp line. Gabriel, what are you doing? The wedding is in 2 days. The photographer needs the final fitting. I have a leak. Nora hasn't checked in for 2 days. Sloane let out a short, elegant sigh, crossing her long legs with the specific ease of someone whose life had never once been touched by the blood that paid for the ring on her finger. Your secretary. Fire her. Hire someone who understands the stakes of this week. She's probably hungover or looking for a raise. Let HR handle it. Gabriel stopped buttoning his cuff. He looked at Sloane, really looked at her. Flawless skin, manicured nails, a life entirely insulated from consequence. She's not a secretary. His voice dropped an octave, carrying the quiet rasp that made grown men empty their bladders. She holds the encryption keys to the offshore accounts. She has the physical ledger for the dock payoffs. If she's gone, she's either selling me out or she's dead. And you think dealing with a rogue employee is a priority right now? My father is flying in from Boston tonight. We have the rehearsal dinner. Send one of your thugs to find her. Gabriel strapped the leather holster across his chest. The weight of the Glock settled against his ribs. I don't send people to handle my liabilities, Sloane. I handle them myself. He walked out of the boutique before she could reply. The brass bell above the door chimed a cheerful, mocking goodbye behind him. Outside, the sky had gone the color of a bruise. Gabriel pulled his coat collar up and walked briskly to the idling SUV. Liam flicked his cigarette into the gutter and scrambled behind the wheel. "Where to, boss?" "South Side, Garrison Street, the apartment building at the dead end." Liam's hands tightened on the wheel. "Garrison, boss? That's Kensington territory. We're not supposed to have boots on the ground there until the ink is dry on the marriage certificate. Drive the car, Liam." The SUV pulled into traffic. Gabriel leaned back and closed his eyes, the irritation in his chest slowly curdling into something colder. He paid Nora a salary that should have secured her a high-rise downtown with a doorman and secure parking. When he'd demanded her home address from his head of security an hour ago, he'd stared at the text in disbelief. Garrison Street was a decaying artery of the city. Condemned buildings, streetlights shot out on purpose, the kind of place police only visited to collect bodies. Why was she living there? He thought back to Tuesday evening, the office empty, Nora standing at the shredder, feeding documents through with mechanical precision. Her skin had gone sallow. There'd been a bruise on her jawline, half covered by poorly matched concealer. He'd asked about it. She'd offered a dry, flat smile and blamed a cabinet door. He'd accepted the lie because it was convenient, because he had a wedding to plan. Gabriel opened his eyes now, a sharp twist of self-disgust settling low in his stomach. If she'd taken the ledger to the Kensingtons to derail the merger, he was going to have to kill her. The thought sat in his chest like ash. He didn't want to kill Nora. He wanted to shake her. He wanted to demand why she'd disrupted his perfectly ordered life. The city changed around them, glass towers giving way to crumbling brick and rusted iron, the rain falling harder, drumming against the roof in a steady, relentless rhythm. "Pull over here." Liam reached for the door handle. "I should come with you." "Stay with the car. Keep the engine running." Gabriel stepped into the rain. He didn't run. He walked with deliberate, heavy steps toward a building that looked like it was slouching against its neighbors for support. No buzzer. The front door's glass had been smashed and patched with warped plywood. He pushed it open. The hinges screamed. The stench hit him immediately. Boiled cabbage, stale cigarette smoke, bleach failing to mask cat urine. Sickly institutional green paint peeled off the hallway walls in long, dry strips. A single fluorescent tube buzzed overhead like an angry hornet. Gabriel's hand brushed the lapel of his coat, feeling the hard outline of his gun. He moved up the stairs. The wood groaned under his weight. Sounds of other lives bled through thin walls. A baby crying relentlessly, a game show murmuring through a cheap television, an argument in a language he didn't recognize. A world of raw survival, the exact opposite of everything he'd just walked out of. 4th floor, apartment 4B, a heavy oak door that looked entirely out of place in a building like this, deeply scratched near the lock. Gabriel reached for the brass knob. It didn't catch. The latch had been broken, the metal casing splintered. He drew his weapon in one fluid motion and pushed the door open, sweeping the room with the barrel of his gun. The apartment was freezing, colder inside than the rain outside. No heat. He lowered the gun slightly, blinking against the grey twilight leaking through pulled shades. There was no furniture. None. The living room was an empty expanse of scuffed hardwood. No couch, no television, no rugs. Just a folding table shoved against the far wall, holding a bulky, outdated laptop, a stack of encrypted hard drives, and a row of meticulously organized manila folders. His folders. The syndicate's business. Where was her life? Where was the money he paid her? "Nora," he called out. His voice sounded too loud in the hollow space. No answer. Only the rain against the glass. He moved into the tiny galley kitchen. The refrigerator stood unplugged, door hanging open on empty wire shelves. The sink was bone dry. He turned toward the short hallway leading to the bedroom and bathroom. That's when he saw it. Smears of dark, rusty brown across the linoleum floor. Not splatters. Drags. The dragging marks of someone who couldn't lift their own weight. The metallic scent of copper cut through the damp cold, sharp and heavy. Gabriel's pulse kicked hard against his throat. He followed the trail to the half-open bathroom door. He pushed it wide. Nora was sitting on the floor, wedged in the narrow space between the chipped porcelain tub and the toilet, lit by a single bare bulb hanging over the sink. She wasn't dead. She looked like she was trying to be, an oversized grey t-shirt soaked through with sweat and blooming stains of blood, a thick, bloody towel wadded and pressed against her left thigh, her head lolled against the tub, skin gone the color of old parchment, stretched translucent over the bones of her face. The bruise from Tuesday had spread into a massive sprawl of purple and yellow across half her face. Her lower lip was split open. She wasn't holding a phone. She wasn't holding his ledger to sell to the Kensingtons. She was holding a curved needle threaded with thick black nylon, her hands shaking too violently to push it through her own skin. Gabriel froze in the doorway. A man who had watched people die without his heart rate changing. A man who had built an empire on violence and never once flinched. The sight of his quiet, unassuming assistant trying to stitch up her own wound alone in a freezing, empty bathroom hit him like a physical blow to the sternum. His gun dropped onto the edge of the sink. Nora's head snapped up. Her eyes, usually sharp and observant, were glassy and unfocused with fever. She stared at him for a long, agonizing moment. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She let out a dry, rattling breath and dropped her head back against the tub. "You're tracking mud on the floor, boss." Gabriel dropped to his knees beside her. The cold seeping through his expensive trousers didn't register. He reached out, his hands hovering for a second before gripping her wrist, gently but firmly prying the needle from her trembling fingers. "What happened?" His voice came out too harsh, too loud, cracking the fragile silence of the room. "Who did this? Don't yell at me." Nora's whisper was barely audible, her eyes closing. "I have a headache." "Nora, look at me." He grabbed her chin, tilting her face up. Her skin burned under his fingers, fever raging beneath the surface. "Who shot you?" A weak, humorless laugh escaped her, ending in a wet cough. "Nobody shot me, Gabriel. Do I look careless? It was a knife, a very big, very ugly knife." He pulled the wadded towel away from her thigh. The wound underneath was deep, jagged. Someone had dragged a blade across the muscle, deliberate, trying to hamstring her. It wept sluggishly, the edges inflamed, angry red spreading outward. Infection had already taken hold. "Why didn't you call the syndicate doctor?" Gabriel snarled, grabbing a cleaner section of towel and pressing it back against the wound. Nora flinched, a sharp hiss tearing from her lips. "Why didn't you call me? The doctor works for your uncle." Her hands gripped the rim of the bathtub, knuckles white. "And your uncle works for the Kensingtons." Gabriel went completely still. The blood rushing in his ears sounded like the ocean. "What did you say?" Nora opened her eyes fully. The fever was there, glassy and unfocused, but the sharp, cynical intelligence that made her indispensable cut straight through it. She looked at him with something that landed halfway between pity and pure exhaustion. "The merger is a hostile takeover. Sloane's family isn't joining you, Gabriel. They're absorbing you." The words dropped into the freezing bathroom like stones into still water. The hit was supposed to happen at the rehearsal dinner tonight. Poison. Clean. They blame a rival family. Sloane plays the grieving widow, and her father takes the docks. She swallowed hard, her throat clicking audibly. "I found the digital trail on Tuesday. Your uncle routed the payoff money through the caterers. I went to intercept the courier carrying the physical proof." She gestured weakly toward her thigh, then her ruined face. "He was faster than I thought." Gabriel stared at her. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, thick enough to feel against his skin. He thought of Sloane in the boutique, complaining about hydrangea colors while she quietly planned his funeral around them. He thought of his uncle, Salvatore, warm and easy at every Christmas dinner, kissing his cheek, calling him mio nipote, with a smile that had apparently been counting down for months. And then he looked at Nora, bleeding out in a freezing box of an apartment, protecting him, alone. Why? The word left him stripped of all authority, just a raw, desperate question from a man who had suddenly realized he was standing on quicksand. "Why didn't you bring this to me immediately? Why are you living like this?" Nora let her head roll toward him, A cynical, tired smile ghosted across her split lip. Because you were picking out suits, Gabriel. You wanted this merger so badly you stopped looking at the shadows. If I'd brought it to you without ironclad proof, you would have thought I was trying to sabotage the wedding. She looked away, focusing on a strip of peeling paint on the far wall. And I live like this because my mother's medical care costs $8,000 a month. The facility is nice. They have gardens. Something tightened in Gabriel's throat. Hard, unyielding. A knot he couldn't swallow past. He paid her enough. Enough for the care and a life of her own besides. But she'd been sinking every spare dollar into keeping her mother comfortable, choosing squalor for herself, so he would never suspect she was vulnerable, so he would never think of her as a liability. Hold still. His voice dropped to a low, rough rumble. He didn't ask permission. He shoved his $3,000 suit jacket off his shoulders, rolled up his sleeves, and dug through the pathetic first aid kit sitting on the toilet lid, a bottle of rubbing alcohol. This is going to burn. Just do it. Nora gritted her teeth, gripping the rim of the tub with both hands. He poured the alcohol directly into the jagged wound. Her back arched violently, a strangled, guttural sound tearing from her throat. She bit down hard on her own shoulder to keep from screaming, her whole body trembling under his hands. Gabriel's jaw locked. He felt every tremor pass through her, like it was moving through his own body. He threaded the needle with steady, mechanical precision. He'd sewn up his own men before. Basements, back alleys, the specific ugly competence violence required. But this felt entirely different. Every puncture through her pale, fevered skin landed like an indictment of his own blindness. You're heavy-handed. Her breath came out ragged, forehead slick with sweat. You should have let the courier go. He kept his voice hard, focusing entirely on pulling the nylon thread tight. You're an administrator, Nora, not muscle. I protect my desk. It lacked heat, the retort automatic, worn smooth from repetition. And you sit behind it. You could have died. I'm not dead yet. Stop nagging. He tied off the stitch, snipping the thread with tiny rusted scissors. Grabbing a roll of gauze, he began wrapping her leg, tight enough to stem the bleeding, gentle enough not to add to the pain. As he worked, he noticed the rest of it, a faint silver scar along her collarbone, a burn mark on her wrist he'd never once seen, because she always wore long sleeves, in every season, without exception. She was a map of quiet, unacknowledged violence. 4 years of taking hits meant for his empire, swallowing every consequence in silence, and handing him his morning coffee the next day, with a blank, composed face like nothing had happened at all. He finished the knot on the bandage. He stayed on his knees, his hands resting lightly against her shins, his ruined dark shirt stained with patches of her blood, the smell of cheap alcohol and sweat clinging to both of them. From the empty living room, a sharp, intrusive buzz cut through the silence. His burner phone. The one only 3 people had the number to. He didn't move. He just looked at Nora. She looked back, chest rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. Answer it. Her voice was barely above a whisper. It's her. It's almost noon. She'll be asking about the seating arrangements. Gabriel reached into his pocket and pulled out the phone. The screen glared bright in the dim bathroom. Sloan. He hit accept, pressing the phone to his ear, his eyes never leaving Nora's face. Where are you? Sloane's voice came through tiny, sharp, impatient. Liam said you went to the south side. Gabriel, the caterer is threatening to walk if we don't finalize the truffle. Risotto versus the wild mushroom. Gabriel stared down at the blood drying in the creases of his own knuckles. He thought of his uncle's warm smile at Christmas. He thought of Sloane sitting on that leather sofa an hour ago, complaining about carnival flowers while she planned exactly how his funeral would proceed. I'm handling something, he said, his voice flat, controlled, giving away nothing. I'll be at the venue by 6. Gabriel, the risotto. I said I'll be there. He ended the call before she could finish, the phone going dark in his hand. Nora watched him with fever-glazed eyes, reading everything in the set of his jaw that 4 years of proximity had taught her to read without effort. You're not going to let this happen tonight. It wasn't a question. Gabriel looked at the empty living room where his most sensitive files sat, organized on a folding table by a woman who nearly died protecting them, protecting him, for 4 years without ever once asking for anything in return. "No," he said, "I'm not." He stood, pulling his ruined jacket back over his shoulders, his eyes moving to the hard drive sitting in the other room. "How solid is the proof?" "Solid enough to end 2 families in 1 room," Nora rasped, closing her eyes again, exhaustion finally winning against the adrenaline that had kept her sharp through the pain. "But you need to see it yourself before you walk into that dinner." Gabriel crouched back down, gathering her carefully against his chest. The same hands that had emptied a room of grown men with a single sentence now moving with a precision entirely foreign to violence. "You're not staying in this apartment another night. I don't have anywhere, you have somewhere now." He carried her out of the bathroom, through the freezing, empty living room, past the folding table holding the proof that was about to end everything he thought he understood about his own family. Liam's face, when Gabriel emerged from the building carrying Nora through the pouring rain, went through 3 distinct stages of shock before settling into grim, silent understanding. "Get the car warm," Gabriel ordered, laying her carefully across the back seat. "We're going to Dr. Ashford. Not the syndicate doctor. The one my uncle doesn't know exists." Liam didn't ask questions. He'd worked for Gabriel long enough to recognize the specific, controlled fury radiating off him now, quieter than rage, more dangerous than anything Liam had witnessed in years of driving this man through the worst nights of his business. As the SUV pulled away from Garrison Street, Gabriel sat in the back seat with Nora's head resting against his shoulder, her blood still drying on his hands, and looked out at the rain-soaked city with the specific cold clarity of a man who had just discovered his entire world was built on a lie. 9 hours until the rehearsal dinner, 9 hours to turn a wedding designed to be his funeral into something else entirely. Dr. Ashford's clinic sat behind an unmarked door, in a converted brownstone, 3 neighborhoods removed from anywhere Gabriel's uncle had ever set foot. Nora went under proper sedation within 20 minutes of arrival. Real anesthesia, real sterile equipment. A surgeon who owed Gabriel a debt from years before his uncle's fingerprints touched anything in his life. The wound reopened, cleaned properly, the infection addressed with an IV drip that would have her fever breaking within hours instead of days. Gabriel stood in the hallway, outside the recovery room, with blood still drying under his fingernails, his ruined shirt discarded somewhere in Ashford's staff locker, a borrowed black t-shirt, stretched too tight across shoulders built for a suit. He didn't sit. He pulled out his own phone, not the burner, his actual line, and called the one person in his organization his uncle had never once met. Cesare, old friend of his father's, semi-retired, running a small logistics operation 2 states away that had nothing to do with Romano business anymore. A man with no reason for anyone to watch him, no reason for anyone to suspect he still answered when Gabriel called. "I need something verified quietly. Today." Cesare's voice, gravelly with age but sharp as ever, didn't hesitate. "Name it." Gabriel read him the account numbers from memory. He'd read them twice on the hard drive before leaving Garrison Street, committing them the way he committed everything that mattered. The caterer's shell account, the timestamps, the routing pattern matching payments to a Kensington-controlled entity 3 layers removed from anything that would show up on a standard audit. Cesare went quiet for a long moment. "That's not sloppy money, kid. That's careful money. Somebody who knew exactly how not to get caught doing something like this." "Confirm it. I need it inside 2 hours. You'll have it in 1. Gabriel ended the call and stood in the hallway with his back against the wall, staring at nothing, replaying 4 years in rapid, brutal succession. The bruise on Tuesday, the long sleeves in July, the meticulous efficiency he'd mistaken for contentment instead of recognizing as the specific discipline of a woman who could never afford to look like anything less than perfectly composed. He'd built an entire empire on reading people, threats, lies, weakness. He could smell it from across a room, had built his reputation on never once missing the signal. He'd missed every single one she'd given him. His second call went to Marchetti, his most trusted lieutenant, a man whose loyalty predated Sloan, predated the merger, predated everything currently threatening to collapse Gabriel's world in on itself. Marchetti's voice came through low, immediate. "Boss, I need the venue quietly secured before 6. Every exit mapped, every staff member vetted in the next 4 hours. Nobody touches the wine service except people I personally trust." A pause. "What's happening tonight?" "A change of plans nobody's been informed of yet, including me, apparently, until about an hour ago." Marchetti didn't ask follow-up questions. That was exactly why Gabriel had called him first. The third call was the hardest. Gabriel stared at his uncle's contact photo for a long moment before pressing dial. Salvatore at 61, silver-haired, smiling in a photo taken at Gabriel's father's funeral 14 years earlier, an arm around a 17-year-old Gabriel who had no idea yet what kind of world he was inheriting. "Nephew." Salvatore's voice was warm, easy, exactly the way it had always been. "Tell me you're not still fussing over the seating chart. Your aunt says, just checking in before tonight, making sure everything's ready on your end. Everything's beautiful, Gabriel. The caterers finalized the menu this morning. Wonderful people. Very accommodating. I handled the deposit myself. Saved you the headache during wedding week." Gabriel closed his eyes. There it was. Careless. Small. Exactly the kind of detail a man confident in his own invisibility lets slip without thinking twice. You didn't have to do that. Family takes care of family. Salvatore's laugh came easy, warm, practiced over decades. "See you at 6, mio nipote." Gabriel ended the call and stood perfectly still in the hallway, the specific cold clarity of total confirmation settling over him like ice water. His uncle had personally handled the caterer's deposit. The exact account Nora's hard drive traced the poison payment through. Cesare called back 43 minutes later. Confirmed. 3 layers deep, but confirmed. The account receives regular transfers from a holding company registered in Boston, same city your future father-in-law flies in from tonight. Whoever set this up was careful, but not careful enough to account for someone actually looking. Thank you, Cesare. Whatever this is, kid, be careful. Your father would want you careful. Gabriel ended the call and walked back into Nora's recovery room. The sun had shifted, gold light cutting low through the blinds, painting long stripes across the white sheets. Nora was awake, ivy taped to the back of her hand, color slowly returning to skin that had looked like old parchment 4 hours earlier. Someone had cleaned the concealer smudges from her jaw, and the full bruise underneath was visible now, deep purple fading to sickly yellow at the edges. She looked exhausted. She also had a laptop open on the rolling table beside her bed, screen angled toward herself, fingers moving across the keyboard with the same relentless precision she brought to everything. Gabriel stopped in the doorway. "They shouldn't have given you that," I asked nicely. Her voice was stronger now, less rasp, more of the dry, cynical edge that had made her indispensable for 4 years. And I told the nurse I'd hack the hospital system if she said no. She believed me. She's not wrong to. Nora glanced up, something almost like a smile ghosting across her split lip, before fading into something more serious. "I confirmed it. Salvatore's handling the caterer's deposit. Cesare already told me." Gabriel crossed the room, pulling a chair close to the bed, close enough to see the exact shade of exhaustion still pulling at her eyes, despite the fluids working through her system. "You called Cesare." "I called everyone you'd call, an hour before you thought to call them." She turned the laptop toward him. "I'm not just building proof for tonight, Gabriel. I'm building what happens after." The screen showed a structure Gabriel recognized immediately, an organizational chart, but not his organization. A map of every account, every associate, every piece of leverage Salvatore had built quietly over the past several years, cross-referenced against Kensington Holdings, with the exact same methodology she'd used to trace the poison payment. "This isn't just tonight," she said. "This is everything. He's been positioning for over a year. The merger was never about you and Sloan. It was the final piece he needed to make the takeover look legitimate instead of hostile. Gabriel stared at the screen. At 4 years of a woman quietly building a second, invisible ledger, tracking every threat to an empire he thought he understood completely. "Why didn't you build this for yourself?" He asked it quietly, genuinely. "You could have taken this to the Kensingtons yourself. Sold it. Disappeared somewhere. Your mother's care wouldn't have cost you everything you owned." Nora looked at him for a long moment, fever-clear eyes, steady, despite everything her body had been through in the last 24 hours. "Because it was never about the money, Gabriel." She turned back to the screen, fingers resuming their work. It was never that simple. He didn't push for more. Some things, he was learning, required patience he'd never once had to practice before today. Instead, he watched her work. Pain and exhaustion visible in every careful movement, but the precision never wavering, never slowing, the same relentless competence that had made her irreplaceable from the very first week she started working for him. "You should be resting." "I'll rest after tonight." She didn't look up. "You have 3 hours before you need to be at that venue. You need to know exactly what you're walking into, and exactly how to walk out of it, without starting a war that gets people killed who don't deserve it." Gabriel leaned back in the chair, watching the sun continue its slow slide toward evening, through the blinds, watching a woman who had nearly bled to death 8 hours ago, now systematically dismantling a conspiracy that would have ended his life at 6 o'clock tonight. He thought about Sloane in the boutique, complaining about flower colors. He thought about his uncle's easy laugh on the phone 20 minutes ago. He thought about 4 years of coffee orders and harbor cops, and a woman who took every hit meant for his empire, without once asking him to notice. "I'm not going to that dinner the same way I would have yesterday." Nora finally looked up from the screen, something steady and certain in her expression despite the fever still lingering behind her eyes. Good, because the man who was going to walk into that room tonight was going to die exactly the way they planned. She held his gaze, unflinching. The man walking in now needs to make sure nobody in that room forgets what happens when they underestimate what's actually protecting you. The clock on the wall read 3:47 p.m. 2 hours and 13 minutes until 300 guests, 2 crime families, and a wedding designed to end in a funeral, instead sat down together in the same room. Gabriel stood, straightening the borrowed shirt across his shoulders, the specific, cold, controlled fury that had built in him since the bathroom on Garrison Street finally settling into something he could use. "Get some rest," he said it quietly, but the command in it was unmistakable. "Marchetti's stationing 2 men outside this door. Nobody gets near you tonight." Nora closed the laptop, exhaustion finally winning over adrenaline as her head sank back against the pillow. "Gabriel." He paused in the doorway. "Don't let Sloane see it coming until it's already happened." Her eyes were already closing, voice fading toward sleep. "That's how you protect the people in that room who actually deserve protecting." Gabriel looked back at her for a long moment, bandaged, exhausted, a map of quiet violence absorbed silently on his behalf for 4 years, and understood with sudden, total clarity that whatever happened in that ballroom tonight, nothing about his life was ever going back to what it had been yesterday. He walked out into the gold evening light, already composing the specific, devastating calm he was going to wear like armor into a room full of people who thought they already knew how tonight would end. The Kensington Grand Ballroom glittered under 300 candles at exactly 6 p.m. Imported silk draped every table, white, silver, black. The palette Sloane had fought her mother over 2 days earlier, arranged now into something magazine perfect, and utterly unaware of what it was actually decorating. Gabriel arrived precisely on schedule. Charcoal suit, freshly pressed, the holster invisible beneath tailoring, built specifically to hide it. He moved through the entrance with the same sanitized brutality he'd worn on the pedestal, except now every handshake was reconnaissance, every warm greeting a quiet inventory of who in this room already knew tonight's real agenda. Sloane met him at the entrance, radiant, composed, her hand finding his arm with practiced ease. "You look tense." "Long day." She studied him for a beat too long, something flickering behind her eyes that Gabriel filed away without reacting to. Whatever it was, suspicion, Guilt, genuine ignorance. He didn't have time to pass it yet. Her father, standing near the head table, raised a glass in Gabriel's direction with the specific warmth of a man counting down hours until he owned the docks. Marchetti's people were already in position, 2 at the north exit, 2 at the south, 3 moving through the kitchen in caterers' uniforms that hadn't been on the original staff roster. The wine service. Gabriel had watched personally as his verified people swapped every bottle destined for the head table 2 hours earlier, the poisoned vintage now sitting in an evidence bag in Marchetti's car 3 blocks away. Salvatore arrived at 6:40, silver-haired, beaming, embracing Gabriel with the same warm, easy affection he'd shown at every family gathering for 14 years. "Mio nipote, look at you, handsome as your father." Gabriel returned the embrace, feeling the specific hollow weight of holding a man he'd once trusted completely, now knowing with total certainty what that same man had spent the last hour orchestrating. The dinner proceeded exactly as planned. The toasts began. Sloane's father rose first, warm and rehearsed, speaking of unity between families, of legacy, of futures built together, every word landing like the specific cruel irony of a man delivering a eulogy disguised as a wedding speech. Salvatore rose next. He lifted his glass, the specific warm smile Gabriel had known his entire life spreading across his face, and began speaking about family, about sacrifice, about the beautiful thing happening tonight. Gabriel stood. The room's temperature shifted before he said a single word. 300 guests registering, without fully understanding why, that something had just changed. He didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. The same flat, dangerous register that had emptied Kensington enforcers' confidence in his office months ago carried easily across the silent ballroom. "I have something to add to my uncle's toast." He laid the folder on the table in front of Salvatore. Financial records, the caterer's account, the routing pattern to the Boston Holding Company, timestamps matching tonight, matching the wine service, matching a plan Nora had nearly died uncovering less than 18 hours earlier. The room's collective breath caught in real time. This wedding was never a merger. He let the words settle, unhurried, absolute. It was a hostile takeover. Poison. Tonight. At this table. My death blamed on a rival family. Sloane plays the grieving widow. Her father takes the docks. Sloane's composure cracked, for the first time since Gabriel had known her. Whatever she'd known or hadn't known, her face in this exact moment told the truth her carefully maintained calm never could. Genuine shock, genuine horror, the specific unraveling of a woman realizing her own wedding had been engineered as her fiancé's execution, and possibly her own unwitting alibi. Salvatore's face did the arithmetic of a cornered man in real time, calculating exits, calculating denials, calculating how many people in this room still owed him loyalty. The number came back 0. Marchetti's people had already sealed every door. "Gabriel," his uncle started, warm and easy, transforming instantly into something desperate. "This is a misunderstanding, a mistake. You handled the caterer's deposit yourself." Gabriel's voice remained perfectly level. "You told me so this afternoon. Saved me the headache during wedding week." The silence that followed was absolute. 300 guests from 2 crime families sat frozen, watching an empire's foundation crack open in real time, watching a nephew dismantle his own uncle's carefully constructed betrayal with nothing but paper and the specific, quiet devastation of total, irrefutable proof. Gabriel didn't finish there. He told them what almost happened tonight. He told them exactly who found the proof, not by name, not yet. Protecting the one person who mattered most from becoming a target in a room still full of uncertainty. He told them exactly what it had cost her, the fever, the knife wound, the empty, freezing apartment she'd chosen over comfort, so nobody would ever suspect how much she was risking. He looked directly at Sloane. "Your wedding night was supposed to be my funeral. The wedding ended there, publicly, completely. Not a quiet postponement whispered through lawyers weeks later. A total, unambiguous detonation in front of every witness whose opinion mattered to both families' reputations. Sloane's father was escorted from the building by his own security, already calculating damage control that would take months to even begin working. Salvatore was removed by Gabriel's people before he finished formulating an exit strategy that no longer existed. The beginning of a reckoning that would unfold over the coming weeks. Gabriel dismantling his uncle's network piece by piece, using the exact meticulous methodology Nora had modeled for him on a bathroom floor less than 24 hours earlier. 3 weeks later, Nora sat in a living room that actually had furniture in it. The recovery had been slow but complete. Color fully returned, the fever long broken, the wound healing clean under proper medical care. She'd protested the new apartment when Gabriel first arranged it, protested harder when she learned he'd quietly upgraded her mother's care facility to one with better proximity, better staff, a garden that actually got afternoon sun. "This isn't charity," Gabriel had told her flatly, the day she tried to refuse it. "This is compensation 4 years overdue." She'd stopped arguing after that. Gabriel visited that evening, not as her employer checking on an asset recovering from injury, but as himself, sitting across from her, in an unfamiliar quiet neither of them had words for yet. "The restructuring's finished," he said, watching her from the armchair across the room. "My uncle's territory absorbed under verified leadership. The Kensington threat neutralized through the leverage your proof gave me. No war, no bodies in the harbor, just paper, exactly the way you built it." Nora looked up from the tea she'd been slowly nursing, something unreadable moving behind her eyes. "You learned that fast. I learned it watching you bleed out on a bathroom floor, rather than come to me without proof." He held her gaze. "That's not something a person forgets quickly." Silence settled between them, comfortable in a way. 4 years of purely transactional proximity had never once managed to be. "Why didn't you tell me about your mother?" He asked it quietly, genuinely, the question that had been sitting in his chest since Garrison Street. 4 years, Nora, not once. She set the tea down, considering the question with the same careful precision she brought to everything. "Because the moment you saw me as someone with something to lose, I stopped being useful to you. I started being a liability." She met his eyes, steady despite the admission. "I needed to matter to you as competent, not as vulnerable." Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, the specific weight of 4 years of missed signals settling over him one final time. "You were never a liability." His voice carried none of the authority he used in boardrooms, none of the danger he used on enemies. Just quiet, complete certainty. "You were the only person in my entire organization who never once needed managing, because you were the only one actually protecting me. Everyone else was just positioning around me." Nora didn't have a response prepared for that. For a woman who had spent 4 years anticipating every possible scenario, building contingencies inside contingencies, staying 3 steps ahead of threats nobody else in the organization even knew existed, this particular truth landed somewhere her preparation had never once reached. The room held them both in a silence that felt, for the first time in either of their lives, entirely uncomplicated. No wedding standing between them anymore. No ledger. No crisis demanding immediate resolution. Just 2 people, finally looking at each other without anything else in the way. If this story had you holding your breath from that bathroom door to that final silence, if it reminded you that the people who protect us the most are often the ones we notice the least, subscribe right now because we are not finished. Share this with someone who needs it. Like this video, drop your city below, and turn on notifications because the next story is already loaded, and I promise you are not ready for it.